Hi there, and thanks so much for joining me. So in this tutorial video, I'm going to show you guys how to calculate descriptive statistics in SPSS. Okay, so that means everything from for continuous variables, mean, standard deviation, interquartile range, those kinds of things. And for categorical variables, things like the mode, for example. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so the first thing, again, is I'm going to show you guys the document you should have open. So this is the Descriptive Statistics SPSS Guide. So I'm just going to go straight through it with you guys. So you should definitely be following along that way. Okay, and it is time to open up SPSS. So again, I'm going to go to Applications. I'm going to go to IBM SPSS Statistics 27, and I'm going to click SPSS Statistics. This might look a little bit different if you're on a Windows computer. I would imagine you would have to go to the Start menu and then Programs. But after that, it should be a very similar process. Okay, so now we are back at that familiar screen, but we are going to need to upload a file. So you might notice if you looked on Canvas, and in fact I could probably show you on Canvas, I have a SPSS data set, which is census. So you're going to need census for this tutorial and the tutorial on z-scores. So if you haven't already, go ahead and click on census and go ahead and click download, and that will enable you to save it. So I'm just going to go ahead and move it over to my desktop. Okay, so now I have a copy. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click open another file. And it's going to give me all of the data sets that I have. I have a lot of them. So I'm just going to go ahead and move over here to desktop and select census. And then I'm going to click open. And voila, right? There is my data set. So what the census file is going to show us is data from 360 different people and various variables talking about their demographics, okay? So the two demographics that we are going to be interested in, or the two variables that we are going to be interested in for this particular tutorial, is we are going to be interested in time spent online, which is a continuous variable, hence this little ruler image here, because that's for scale variables or continuous variables, okay? So we're interested in how much time these individuals spend online. And we're also going to be interested in education level, okay? So education level is a categorical variable, and it is an ordinal variable, okay? So that's why it's being given this little image here, is it's a categorical variable, specifically an ordinal variable, okay? So there are different orders of magnitude. Obviously, an associate's degree is going to involve more education than a high school diploma, and a PhD is going to have more years of education than a master's degree, and so on. So it does have that property of magnitude. So it is a ordinal variable. Okay, so what I'm going to show you in this tutorial is I'm going to show you how to calculate descriptive statistics for a continuous variable and descriptive statistics for a nominal variable. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with that. Okay. Okay, so how would we get descriptive statistics for a categorical variable? Well, for categorical variables, we're going to want to go to the Analyze menu and select Descriptive Statistics Frequencies. Okay, so again, I went to Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies. Okay, so what I'm going to do once this dialog box opens is I'm going to look for educational level, which is right there. Okay, and I'm going to use this blue arrow to move it over to the variables box. Okay, and we're going to click on charts. Okay, and we're going to ask for a bar graph because this is a categorical variable, right? And we're also going to, under chart values, okay, we're going to indicate frequencies, okay? But we could also choose, if we wanted to, percentages. Either of those would work, okay? So we're going to select bar charts and frequencies, and then we're going to click OK. Okay, so we have a table of output, right? So what kinds of information does this table provide us with? Okay, well, let's look at each column. So in the frequency column, okay, if we were to add all of those values up, we would get a total of 360, right? So what does that tell us? It tells us our value of n, or the size of our sample, is 360. Okay, if I were to scoot over to valid percent, what that tells us are the percentages of each person in that category, okay, or the percent of people in that category, okay? So for example, 59.7% of our sample have a college degree, right? And 20% have a high school degree, and so on. Okay? Okay, so what can we extrapolate, or what other information can we gather from this table, right? Well, by looking at either the frequencies or the valid percents, we can find the biggest value, right? And that tells us what the mode is, okay? So what is the biggest value, either the biggest frequency or the biggest percent in our data set, right? Well, we have the most people in our data set. Most people in our data set have completed a college degree, okay? So that is the mode, or the most frequent value is college degree. 215 people out of 360 have completed a college degree, which corresponds to 59.7%. Okay? All right. So there we have our descriptives for categorical variables. But what about, and we could also read this bar graph, by the way, and by looking at the tallest bar, obviously with the greatest frequency, that also indicates for us what our mode is. Okay, so now we're ready to look at continuous variables, or our continuous variable. right? So how do we get descriptive statistics for a continuous variable? Okay, well, we're going to go up to the same Analyze menu. We're going to go to Descriptives again, but this time we're going to click Explore. Okay, and now we need to choose which variable we're going to get our descriptive stats for. Okay, so which variable do we want our descriptive stats for? We want a variable for time spent online. Okay, so we're going to select time spent online, and using this blue arrow, we're going to move it over to the dependent list. Okay, all right, so we've inputted our variable. And we're going to go back to the plots menu, and we're going to make sure that we've selected factor levels together. And instead of a stem and leaf plot, we are going to select histogram, okay? Because that is the standard plot that we use to check for things like whether our data follows a normal distribution, for example. Okay, and then we're just going to click continue, and then we're going to click OK. All right, so now we have a lot of different information about our time spent online variable. Okay, so for example, in the first table, again, we know that we have a total of 360 participants in our data set. Okay, and we also know that our mean, for example, is 57.37. Okay, we know that our median is 58. We know that our variance is 539. Okay, and if we take the square root of our variance, we get our standard deviation, which is 23.23. Okay, we know the value of our range, which is 108, which is simply 109 minus 1. Okay, we have our interquartile range, which is 34.75. And we also have a value that corresponds to skewness, right? So remember, I told you that SPSS has various tests we can use to determine whether our data, our distribution is normal or not. So this is one of those tests. So remember, I told you that distributions that are normal are symmetrical, okay? Whereas distributions that are not normal are either positively skewed or negatively skewed, right? So we can use these two values, the skewness statistic, which is negative 0.172, and the standard error of the skewness statistic, which is 0.129, to determine whether our distribution is normal or not, right? So how do we do that exactly? Well, we want to divide the skewness value by the standard deviation, right? So if we divide negative 0.172 by 0.129, okay, we get a value of negative 1.33. So how do we interpret that value? Okay, well, if that value, okay, is smaller than negative 3, okay, we know that our distribution is negatively skewed. If that value is greater than positive 3, we know that our distribution is positively skewed. But if it's between negative 3 and positive 3, then we know it's symmetrical, or we know that the shape of the distribution is normal. Okay? So now that we know that, right, negative 1.33 isn't smaller than negative 3 or greater than positive 3, so we can assume that our distribution is normal because it's not skewed, it's symmetrical, okay? We can also take a look at our histogram and see that again it appears very symmetrical. And we can look at our box plot to see if there are any outliers, right? Again, because our distribution is fairly symmetrical or fairly normal, we can assume that there aren't going to be a lot of extreme scores or outliers. And indeed, this is the case. So if we look at our box plot, there are no circles or asterisks anywhere outside of our whiskers. So we can assume that there are no outliers and our distribution is normal. Okay, all right. So this concludes the SPSS tutorial on calculating descriptive statistics for both continuous and categorical variables. And I look forward to seeing you in my last tutorial, which will focus on z-scores. Okay.